My husband told me he'd found someone new, but when he read what I handed him, he nearly fell off his damn chair. And honestly, I don't regret a thing. My name is Delaney Hart. I'm 33, and I've been married to my husband, Cade, for 7 years. For most of that time, I believed we had a steady life. Not perfect, not glamorous, but ours. The kind of marriage built on routines and shared grocery lists, not drama. I thought I knew him better than anyone. I thought I could predict the way he breathed. But then he started changing. At first, it was small things. Cade suddenly began working late. Even though I knew his office turned into a ghost town by 5. He took phone calls in the garage, speaking just low enough that I couldn't make out the words. He bought new shirts, ridiculously expensive ones, and started styling his hair with the kind of precision you only do for someone who isn't your wife. I kept trying to excuse it. Stress, maybe. A slump. Men go through phases. Marriage isn't supposed to be glitter and fireworks every day. But there's a specific kind of silence people use when they're slipping away, hoping you won't notice until the distance is too big to cross. Then one Thursday evening, he asked me to sit at the kitchen table. His tone was stiff, like this was a business meeting. He folded his hands like he was bracing for applause instead of consequences. "Delaney," he said, "I met someone." No pause. No softness. No shame. Her name was Tessa Marwick, someone from his office who understood him, who made him feel alive again, who wasn't trapped in the routine like I apparently was. He said all of this while sipping the coffee I made him, while wearing the watch I gave him for our anniversary, in the home I spent years nurturing. He spoke like he was giving me a weather update, like I should thank him for his honesty. When he finished, he leaned back and waited for me to fall apart. I could see it in his eyes. He expected tears, maybe begging, maybe promises to fix myself so he'd stay. But I didn't cry. Something steadier took over instead, something cold and clear. "I just need 1 hour," I said. "Before you leave. There's something I want you to read." That confused him. His ego puffed up immediately. He assumed I was writing a goodbye letter or pouring my heart out for him to step on. "All right," he said, smug and relaxed. I walked to the bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand, and took out a thick envelope I'd been building quietly for weeks. Proof. Receipts. Dates. Screenshots. Legal documents. A plan he never imagined I was capable of. When I handed it to him, he smirked like he'd already won. But when he opened it, that smirk cracked. When he flipped the first page, his face drained of color. And in that moment, watching him realize he wasn't holding a love letter, he was holding his consequences, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Delaney thinks back to the beginning, when everything between her and Cade felt easy. They met years ago while volunteering at a community garden. She remembered the way he smiled as he helped older neighbors plant tomatoes, and how he stayed late to clean up without being asked. They talked about wanting the same kind of life, simple, honest, steady. Back then, he listened closely when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and held her hands like he never wanted to let them go. It's hard for her now to match that man with the one who sits across from her at the kitchen table, cold and distant. She remembers the first small signs that something had shifted. They were barely noticeable at the time. Little comments that stung but were easy to brush off. Cade started dismissing her opinions in quiet, sharp ways. The kind you could almost pretend weren't meant to hurt. If she mentioned something she learned at work or shared an idea about their future, he would shrug and mumble, "Sure, if you say so," like nothing she said mattered. Once, when she excitedly told him about a big wedding order at her flower shop, he laughed and said, "It's just flowers, Laney. You act like you're running a Fortune 500. It felt like a joke, but it didn't sound like one. At gatherings, Cade became a little too charming with other women, especially his co-workers. He would lean in close, laugh too loudly at their jokes, and forget Delaney was even in the room. She told herself it was harmless, that he was just being friendly. She tried to believe his arm around her waist a few minutes later made up for it. She wanted to think marriage meant sticking it out, being patient, letting small things slide. But the small things grew sharper. Cade began twisting her words during arguments, making her doubt herself. When she asked simple questions, he acted like she was accusing him of something terrible. If she said she felt ignored, he told her she was too sensitive. If she asked why he was on his phone so much, he rolled his eyes and said she was imagining things. Slowly, she felt like she was losing her footing. Then there were the messages he hid. He kept his phone face down, taking calls in another room. Once, she walked in, and he jumped like he'd been caught doing something wrong. He laughed it off, but his eyes told a different story. The night he came home from a client dinner, without his wedding ring, her stomach dropped. He claimed he took it off to avoid scratching it on his beer bottle. She knew that wasn't true, but she nodded anyway. She didn't fight. Not yet. Instead, she started writing things down, dates, comments, odd moments that didn't sit right. She didn't want to accuse him without knowing the whole picture. The moment I finally knew the truth didn't come with shouting or some dramatic scene. It came quietly, in pieces, each one landing harder than the last. It started with a hotel receipt I found by accident. I was looking for a warranty paper in Cade's desk drawer when I saw it tucked under a stack of envelopes. It was for a luxury hotel across town, booked under his name, on a night he told me he was at the office fixing a burst pipe. I remember staring at the date printed on the top, my hands shaking. There was no reason for him to be in a hotel that night. None. I sat there on the floor for what felt like a long time, just breathing slowly and trying to push back the feeling that everything was suddenly sliding out from under me. Then there was the perfume. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even close to anything I would wear. It was sharp and sweet, the kind of scent you notice even after someone walks away. Cade came home wearing it more than once. I would hug him, hoping the closeness would feel familiar again, and instead I would get a whiff of something that told me someone else had been near him, very near. He blamed it on coworkers, on walking past someone in the office, on anything he could think of. But my chest tightened every time, because deep down I already knew those excuses didn't fit. The final push came from our neighbor, Evan Corbett. We ran into each other near the mailbox, and he casually mentioned seeing Cade downtown the week before. Didn't know he dyed his hair blonde, Evan joked, not realizing what he had said. I froze. Cade hadn't dyed anything. Evan noticed my reaction and tried to backtrack, saying maybe he was mistaken, but I could tell he wasn't. The image of Cade holding hands with another woman, just living his life like I didn't exist, hit me so hard I felt dizzy. That night, I asked Cade about everything quietly without anger. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted him to look me in the eye and tell the truth. Instead, he twisted every question I asked. He called me paranoid, saying I was making up stories. He said I was clingy. He even told me I was boring. He said it like it was nothing, like the word wouldn't cut me open. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not because he was cheating, but because he didn't care enough to even pretend he respected me. I cried after he went to bed, not for the marriage we used to have, but for the way he now saw me, as someone he didn't even need to lie to gently. So I started writing everything down. Each lie. Each suspicious night. Each receipt. Every small detail. I didn't argue with him anymore. I didn't accuse him. I just watched, listened, and documented. All of those pages, the proof of how long he'd been drifting away, are sitting inside the envelope he's reading right now. I reached a point where I had to face something important about myself. Cade thought he was married to someone soft, someone he could talk over, someone who would cry and then forgive him because that was easier. What he didn't know was that I am not the type to fall apart and stay broken. I might get hurt, but I don't stay down. I don't lose quietly, and I don't let someone walk all over me without consequences. Once I accepted that Cade was cheating, I started looking deeper, trying to understand just how far things had gone. That's when I discovered Tessa wasn't just some woman he was sneaking around with. He was spending our money on her. Not small amounts either. Expensive dinners. Gifts. Transfers he tried to label as work expenses. I saw withdrawals from our joint account that I never approved. Seeing those numbers made me feel sick. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft wrapped in romance. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. If I did, he would twist everything again, call me crazy, and make me doubt myself all over. So instead, I made a quiet appointment with a lawyer named Margot Ellery. She had a reputation in town for being tough, smart, and unwilling to sugarcoat anything. When I walked into her office, she didn't treat me like a fragile woman. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Tell me everything." I told her more than I had told anyone. The hotel receipt, the perfume, the neighbor, the lies, the missing money. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in quick, sharp strokes. When I was done, she didn't ask if I wanted to fix my marriage. She asked, "Do you want to protect yourself?" I said yes. From there, we built a plan. A careful, detailed plan that didn't rely on emotions, only facts. First, I gathered proof of Cade's spending. Margot showed me what to look for and how to document it correctly. Second, we collected examples of emotional neglect, the things he had been doing for months. Not shouting or slamming doors, but the slow, steady ways he pushed me aside. Third, she helped me secure my own assets, my shop, my savings, everything that was legally mine. And last, we prepared divorce papers that made it clear Cade's actions were the reason for everything that would follow. Margot moved faster than I expected. She had the filings ready within days. All I had to do was sign them. The moment I held the papers in my hands, a strange calm settled over me. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. I didn't tell Cade. I didn't warn him. I didn't argue with him anymore or ask questions he wouldn't answer. I simply tucked the legal documents, along with all my evidence, into the thick envelope he's holding right now. He thinks he's in control of the situation. He has no idea his choices caught up to him before he even opened that envelope. After I learned the truth, things between Cade and me shifted in a way that was almost impossible to ignore. He stopped pretending. Instead of hiding his distance, he let it show openly. He started avoiding me on purpose, walking past me in the hallway without a word, leaving early in the morning, coming home long after I had gone to bed. He wore new shirts I had never seen before, nicer ones than he'd ever bought while we were together. His shoes were polished, his hair carefully styled, and there were nights he returned with faint scratches on his neck, the kind that didn't come from work or stress. I didn't ask about them. I didn't ask why he smelled like a bar one night and like someone's perfume the next. The quieter I became, the more unsettled he grew. He wasn't used to me being calm. He was used to me filling the silence, trying to fix things, trying to understand him. Now I barely reacted, and that confused him more than any argument would have. He would glance at me sometimes with a look that almost seemed nervous, like he felt something happening that he couldn't control. Then one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. There was no return address, but I knew exactly who it was from the moment I opened it. The handwriting was neat, sharp, almost proud. Tessa had written it. She didn't sign her name, but the words were enough. She mocked me for being replaced, said she hoped I wouldn't take it too hard, and wrote that Cade deserved someone exciting. The cruelty of it made my chest tighten, not because of what she said, but because of how much she enjoyed saying it. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I simply folded the letter and placed it with the other documents I'd been gathering. I wanted Cade to see it later, not as revenge, but as proof of how deep his betrayal had gone. Not just physical, but emotional. I wanted him to see the kind of person he had chosen over the woman he once promised everything to. During this time, Margot, my lawyer, worked closely with me. She built a timeline showing where our money had gone, matching every dinner, gift, and hotel charge to the dates he claimed to be working late or handling emergencies. Seeing it laid out so clearly was painful, but it also made everything undeniable. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a long, steady choice he made over and over. I gathered everything, screenshots, receipts, the letter, and the timeline Margot created. Each piece made the picture clearer. Each detail prepared me for the moment I knew would come sooner or later. The moment Cade finally decided he was done pretending and tried to walk out of our marriage. What he didn't know was that I had already prepared for that moment long before he reached for the door. The night everything finally broke open started quietly, almost like any other evening. Cade walked into the house with a stiff look on his face, the kind he wore when he had already made a decision. He didn't sit down or take off his jacket. He just stood there and said he was moving out for clarity, as if leaving your wife was the same thing as taking a weekend trip to clear your mind. While he talked, I saw something through the window, 2 suitcases in the back of his truck. Not old ones either. Freshly packed, sitting upright like they were waiting for him. He hadn't come to talk. He had come to walk out. I didn't ask him about the bags. I didn't ask where he was going or why he bothered pretending this was about clarity. Instead, I told him I made dinner and asked if he wanted to eat before he left. He looked surprised, almost unsure, but he agreed. Maybe he thought I was accepting everything quietly. Maybe he thought I was too shocked to push back. Either way, he sat down at the table. I watched him as he talked. He rambled about needing space, needing to figure out who he was, needing a fresh start. Every sentence was another lie, another excuse to make himself feel better about the choices he had already made. He couldn't even say the truth with a straight face. I just nodded and listened, letting him spill every practice line. Then he finally said the words he had been building up to. He wanted a divorce. He said it calmly, as if he expected me to break down or collapse into tears. He even added that he planned to start fresh with Tessa, like it was something I should support or understand. He waited for me to fall apart. He kept glancing at me, checking for signs of heartbreak. But all I felt was a strange calm. I had seen this moment coming long before he imagined it. So I smiled, just a small, steady smile, and said, "Before you go, there's something you need to read." He froze for a second, thrown off by my tone. I stood, walked to the drawer where I kept the envelope, and placed it gently on the table in front of him. The envelope was thick, heavy, almost too full to close. He stared at it, confused, like he couldn't decide if it was a goodbye letter or something else entirely. Then he slowly opened it. The first page didn't even finish settling on the table before his jaw tightened, sharp and sudden, as if someone had punched him without touching him. And that's where everything truly began to crack. Cade's hands shook a little as he pulled out the first page of the envelope. At first, he looked bored, like he expected a long emotional letter he could tune out. But the second his eyes focused on the paper, that confidence he carried around like armor began to crack. The first few pages were photos, clear, dated, and impossible to explain away. Pictures of him walking into places he told me he'd never been, standing close to a woman he claimed he barely knew, holding her in ways no husband should hold anyone but his wife. He flipped through them fast at first, then slower, like each one hit harder than the last. The receipts came next. Fancy dinners he swore were work meetings. Gifts charged to our joint account. Hotel charges on nights he said he was catching up on paperwork. I watched his face tighten as he recognized every place, every date, every lie. Then came the screenshots. His messages with Tessa, ones he thought he had deleted. The flirtatious lines. The late-night plans. The promises he made her while I slept in our bed thinking he was exhausted from work. He stared at those messages for a long time, as if looking at them long enough might make them disappear. Next was the financial proof. The pages showed every withdrawal, every transfer he never mentioned, every bill he covered for Tessa with money we both earned. He blinked hard, like he couldn't believe the numbers were real, like the paper itself was attacking him. Then he reached the divorce filing. I watched the color drain from his face as he read the line that named his affair as the reason for the separation. He swallowed, stiff and uncomfortable, like the words were stones he couldn't get down. His chair scraped loudly across the floor as he leaned back, glaring at me. "What is this?" he demanded. "Were you spying on me? Digging through my things? This is dramatic, Delaney. This is insane." But I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just watched him unravel, and my silence bothered him more than any words could have. He kept flipping pages, his breathing uneven, his forehead tense. As he read further, he realized something even worse. I had protected myself completely. My lawyer had helped me secure the house legally under my name, including the car and almost all of our savings. The plan was solid, airtight, and already filed. He froze when he reached the last page. It was a short note I wrote by hand. "You didn't leave me. I released you." His eyes darted back to the beginning, then to me, then to the page again. When he reached the final clause, confirming I had secured the house, the car, and the majority of our savings, he looked like he'd lost his balance. His mouth fell open, and he gripped the edges of the table as if he might slide right out of his chair. For the first time in a long time, Cade realized he wasn't the one in control anymore. Cade stared at the papers for a long time, but when the shock finally wore off, panic rushed in fast. He pushed the envelope aside and reached for my arm like he suddenly cared. His voice cracked as he said, "Delaney, wait, we need to talk. I made a mistake. I didn't mean for things to go this far." For months he had been cold, distant, and uncaring. Now, with everything in writing and the consequences staring him in the face, he wanted a conversation. I stayed still, letting him speak, letting him feel the fear he had never imagined he'd feel with me. Then his phone rang. The screen lit up with Tessa's name, and he froze. I picked up before he could snatch it away. Her voice hit me like a slap, loud, angry, demanding to know why Cade hadn't shown up to meet her. Before she could spit out another insult, I calmly said, "You might want to check your mail soon. You're listed in the legal documents." There was silence for one hard second. Then a sharp inhale. Then she hung up. But she wasn't gone. 2 seconds later, she called Cade back and screamed at him through the phone so loudly I could hear every word even though it wasn't on speaker. She yelled that he lied to her, that she didn't sign up to be dragged into legal mess, and that she wasn't going down with him. He tried to calm her, stuttering and tripping over his own excuses. But she cut him off and hung up again. The look on his face said it all. In one moment, he realized he had lost both of us. When the call ended, he stood there shaking, not from anger but from fear. He opened his mouth like he wanted to try again, to convince me to undo the mess he created. But I didn't give him the chance. "You'll need to find another place to stay," I said in a steady voice. "Today." His eyes widened. "Lainey, please, just give me a few days. I don't have anywhere to." "You'll figure it out," I said softly. "You always do when it's something you want." He begged a little more, but it didn't matter. The decision was already made. He saw it in my face and finally stopped talking. Then, defeated, he walked to the bedroom and stuffed a few things into a duffel bag. No suitcase. No planning. Just whatever he could grab quickly. When he stepped outside, some of the neighbors were already on their porches, pretending not to stare. They watched him climb into his truck, his face red, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. And then he drove away, alone, exactly the way he chose to be. I decided it was time to take back my life. I reopened my flower shop, giving it a fresh look and new name. Every detail mattered to me, from the colors to the arrangements. It felt like a piece of me had come back, a part that had been buried under lies and pain for so long. Working with flowers again made me feel alive, and every smile from a customer reminded me that I was capable of happiness on my own terms. I also joined a hiking group. At first, I thought it would be just exercise, but it became so much more. The fresh air, the quiet of the trails, and the simple challenge of each hike helped me feel strong again. I started noticing the little things, like the sound of leaves under my feet or the way sunlight peeked through the trees. Each hike was a step away from my past and a step toward myself. I reached out to my family too. During my marriage, I had pulled away from them, thinking I could handle everything alone. Now, I was ready to reconnect. We spent time together, sharing stories and laughter I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't always easy. Some wounds took time to heal, but every moment brought me closer to the people I had missed. One day, I received a letter from Tessa. She apologized for her part in everything, explaining that Cade had lied to her just as he had lied to me. Reading her words stirred something in me, but not anger. I realized that I didn't want revenge anymore. I had already won by reclaiming my life and my peace. Her apology was just a reminder of how far I had come. I've come to understand that this isn't a story with a neat, happy ending. It's about rebuilding. I am learning to enjoy my own company, to make choices for myself, and to trust my instincts again. I wake up each day feeling a little stronger, a little freer. I laugh more easily now, and when I cry, it's for healing, not hurt. The quiet freedom I feel is the most important victory. I don't need someone else to validate my worth or dictate my happiness. Every flower I arrange, every trail I hike, every conversation with my family reminds me that I am enough. I'm taking life one step at a time, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm truly living. I know there will be challenges ahead, but I feel ready. I've learned to trust myself, to value my own strength, and to find joy in the small things. Life isn't perfect, and it doesn't need to be. This is my beginning, and it feels like freedom. Cade lost his job soon after HR discovered he had broken the rules by dating a subordinate. It didn't take long before Tessa left him too. I heard about it, but I didn't feel the need to gloat or celebrate. It was simply the consequence of his actions, and I had moved past wanting him to feel guilty. A few days later, he reached out to me. He wanted one more chance, and said he missed what we had. Part of me felt the old pull of memories, but I knew that wasn't what I needed. This meeting wasn't about reconciliation. It was about closure, finally drawing a line under the part of my life he had made so complicated. When I met him, I could see the man he had become, and I realized he wasn't the person I had once loved. I gave him a note, simple and clear. I loved who you used to be. I don't love the man you became. I didn't explain, argue, or get caught up in his excuses. It was enough. Those words were all the closure I needed, and I could finally let go. I walked away without looking back. Each step felt lighter than the one before. There was no bitterness, no leftover anger, just a quiet sense of freedom. It was strange how good it felt to finally release someone who had caused so much hurt. I wasn't defined by the pain anymore. Later, I stood on my porch as the evening light fell across my face. The air was calm, and the colors of the sunset felt almost like a promise. I thought about all the choices I had made, the pain I had endured, the heartbreak I had survived, and I realized something important. I may not have chosen the pain, but I had chosen the ending. That choice was mine, and it felt powerful. I breathed in deeply, letting the warmth of the evening settle over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt a real sense of peace. I didn't need him in my life anymore, and I didn't need the past to define me. Standing there, I understood that moving forward didn't mean forgetting, but it did mean reclaiming my own life. I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring the quiet, and felt the weight of everything lift. The chapter with Cade was over, and my life was finally mine again. I was free, and that freedom felt like the truest kind of victory.